Before we begin, this review contains content about very real sexual activities. Please do not watch this content if you are below the age of 17. When I first played Criminal Girls Invite Only when it came west, I was expecting a fan service heavy game. What I found was a surprisingly nice dungeon crawler that I really got into. So when I heard that the sequel was coming west, I got a little hyped for it. I really liked the dungeon crawling in the first game, so I really wanted to check out the second game, and that I have. Here is my official review of the PlayStation Vita title, Criminal Girls 2 Party Favors. The storyline of Party Favors starts out much in the same way as Invite Only's story started. You wake up with no memories of who you are, and you're told that you are what's called a program instructor. It is your duty to take a group of girl delinquents under your wing, people who died committing sins in their lives, and it is your job to help them face those sins and reform to be given another chance to go back into the real world and be good people. If you remember when I reviewed the first game, I said the story wasn't anything special. The second game's story starts the same way, but once you get that first hour out of the way, everything else is pretty much completely different. There's a lot more character background for all of the characters in your party, and even the main character has a lot more character development. In the first game, the main character never talked outside of dialogue choices. In this game, you see a lot of bonds being formed between the main character and all of the girls. Not to mention the overall plotline that gives you a lot more background information on the Reformation program and Hell itself. Much like its predecessor, Criminal Girls 2 is a turn-based dungeon crawling RPG. Most of your time is going to be spent running through dungeons, solving light puzzle elements, fighting through enemies and bosses, and a little bit of your time is also going to be taken up taking part in mini games oriented around the touchscreen to further develop your characters and learn new skills. As I said a moment ago, the bulk of your game time is going to be spent traveling through dungeons. Not only do dungeons have enemies to fight and bosses to take down, there are some light puzzle elements, like hitting switches to open up new paths, and save points for you to find. Save points are important because they offer a lot of different services. First of all, you can rest to heal your HP. You can motivate the girls in motivation time in minigames, which I'll touch on in just a moment. You can use the shop to buy and sell items. And lastly, you can use it to save your progress, which is an especially important feature that I'm also going to explain a little bit later. Before we go on, let's talk about motivation time. This is one of the key features of the series. Motivation time, or punishment time in Japan, is the game's way of throwing sadomasochism into a Japanese RPG. If you are not familiar with that term, SM is a very real activity in the world of kink and BDSM, involving humiliation play, bondage play, and torture play. Now, if you're not of proper age to be able to take part in these very real sexual activities, please don't try this at home. Now, during motivation time, you use CP points that you get from winning battles to interact with the girls. As I said earlier, this has to do with humiliation play, bondage play, and torture play. All of these activities are going to be very real activities that people in the BDSM world really do. Shock treatment, spanking, rope play, the list goes on. The actual touch interactions are pretty simple. Swipe the screen here, tap the screen over here, and doing all of these well will get you points towards leveling up. And every level up you do in motivation time will allow your character to learn new skills. If seeing the girls in this type of sexual act is not to your liking, this game is not for you. These features are technically optional, but you would have no hope of beating the game without these skills. Basically, you have to do it. Now let's get to combat. During combat, you're going to be taking part in turn-based battles. But there are a couple things that make these battles more strategic and more of a challenge. Every turn, you have one command for each of your characters that you can choose from, but every command is chosen randomly. One of your characters could have an ultra powerful ice magic attack, but when the randomizer hits, you might only be able to do a normal attack with them. That brings us to another thing I want to say. Criminal Girls 1 was a decently difficult RPG. Criminal Girls 2 is a very difficult RPG. There are difficulty spikes everywhere, and all of the difficulty spikes are huge. You cannot go through this game just fighting all your battles and going to a boss fight. Every single boss fight, every single dungeon will require you to stop, grind for levels, grind for CP to get motivation time skills. If you don't like grinding, you will not like this game. Now, all of this does come together pretty well if you can take the grinding. Your entire journey through the game should take you at least 25 hours. I hit between 25 and 26 hours on my save file when I was just barely able to manage the final boss, and there were a lot of very close calls in that fight. Now, if you want to be more prepared for this, or if you want to go into the post-game content, you can expect your total playtime to be more like 30 to 40 hours. Now let's talk about controls. On the PlayStation TV, you have button alternatives for all of the motivation time touch sequences, but I want to talk about the touch controls of this. A lot of the touch controls are very simple to use, swiping the screen or tapping the screen. The problem is, half the time, the touch sensitivity is completely off in the game. You can tap exactly where you're supposed to tap for a slap maneuver and it won't register. Or you can slide your finger in the exact spot you're supposed to and it won't register half the time. This is a huge problem, especially if you're on the Vita and you want to use touch controls. As far as the visual presentation is concerned, this is a huge step up from the first game. Invite only looked like a PSP game that was literally just copied and pasted onto a PS Vita memory card. Party Favors has a lot more polish, the character models move instead of being static during cutscenes, and all in all, you won't see a single graphical flaw anywhere. Plus, all of the slowdown that happened during battle animations in the first game are completely gone here. It is optimized a million times better than Invite Only ever was. Criminal Girls 2 Party Favors improves a whole lot on the series formula, from smoother visuals to a much more interesting story. Now, there is still adult sexual content to be considered in all of the minigames, and there are a couple issues with the touch controls. But if you're looking for a grind-heavy dungeon crawler, this is a very solid experience. Reviews to go rates Criminal Girls 2 Party Favors a 7 out of 10. If you'd like to discuss this further, feel free to go to my site at www.reviewstogo.com.